Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Mark Fenton.
Hi.
Let him get started shortly. I thought I'd first start and tell you a little bit about Mark and how I know him. I'm going to kind of read off some things I've found on the internet.
Oh, that's not good. The internet, God knows what you find there.
He's a National Public Health and Planning and Transportation Consultant. He's an adjunct associate professor at Tufts University, Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy, and the former host of the American Walking series on PBS television. He's authored numerous books, one of which he brought today. I think he's donating to the,
yes, I'd like to.
Senior Center. The Complete Guide to Walking for Health, Weight Loss, and Fitness. But all those big credentials is really not the main reason why I invited Mark to come today. I'm just lucky to live a couple doors down from Mark, and I have for 20 years.
Yeah.
Our children are friends. My oldest daughter and Mark's daughter have been friends since they were very babies, and are graduating Scituate High School this year.
Yeah.
But all the years I've known Mark, he was always walking. He was always doing outdoor physical activity. In particular, he always walked. I remember him walking his son to school from very young while his son biked. And then to town or to do errands or any of that, whether the weather was good, whether it was bad, whether the winds were howling across the marsh in the harbor, he walked. I walked with my children. Not necessarily probably for the same reasons Mark did. I think I was just trying to get out of my house. But my son was about 2 years old, and he got a tricycle for Christmas, and he biked all the way down to the market and back. And I thought, wow, he's just like Mark Fenton. And ever since then, my son has been biking, and Mark has always commented about my son out biking. And I think because of the connection that our two sons had biking and our two daughters, we've been busy living our lives, but we have been friends ever since. He's helped me to keep physical activity, walking, and being engaged in my community just through watching the way he lives his life. He introduced my family to the walking school bus. So our whole neighborhood of kids walked as a group to school for years.
That's right.
Parents alternating, taking the group, picking up house to house, just like a bus would do, but on foot. So that was a whole new world for me and very exciting. So he's introduced this to my family. He's showed us that these simple but very important lifestyle ways of living is just important, and it's stayed important to me as well. So, not to get too sentimental, but he's inspired my family with all the choices that we make and to keep them a priority in my life. I'm so lucky to have Mark and his family, and I'm especially glad to have him here to share his personal and professional experiences with you today, so that you might incorporate some of the mental and physical wellness topics that we've talked about for the last 12 weeks. Because I'm lucky that I have this constant inspiration because I see him walk down the street past my house, out my window, which we don't all have that person in our neighborhood. But I'm hoping his words will inspire everyone to try and think about incorporating some of the things that we've talked about going forward after this class wraps up. So, with that, I will let
Thank you so much, Lisa.
I'm looking forward to
Thank you so much. That was really very sweet. Thank you very, very much. That touches my heart to think that. She's being much too generous, of course. Lisa has been instrumental to lots of the great things that we've been able to do in the neighborhood and the town. So I can't thank you enough. And you guys are really lucky to get to work with her on this program here. It's a privilege to join you. As Lisa said, I've lived in town 20 years. Lorraine and I were just talking. She said, were you related to the Fenton, Johnny Fenton, the Fenton family? Same spelling of the last name, but I've known his well, I guess one of his sons, right, Bobby, who is an avid surfer and who I surf with actually at Peggotty Beach. We live only a block apart, but we don't think there's any relationship. We've traced the families back and don't think there's any, but he's become a friend, a surfing buddy. In fact, got my family into it, and one of the many physical activities we now are lucky enough to enjoy. My son became an avid surfer. He turned me into one. So if you ever drive on Peggotty Beach Road and you know right where it bends and you can look right out over Peggotty Beach and you can see the surfers out there in the water sometimes, even in the winter when it's really crazy cold, I'm one of those crazy people out there. And when you look out, you'll notice me because you'll see the big mustache, even when the wetsuit is on with the hood, right? You know, in the middle of winter, and we're all covered in black from head to toe because we have our wetsuits and our gloves and our boots. You'll see the mustache poking out. A number of times I had friends say, I know it was out there because I saw frost on your mustache. I literally, so I'm that crazy guy, and I actually consider it a great privilege to live in this town, and by the way, a privilege to join you today. In case you only came for the breakfast and didn't really want to hear my whole story, which is fine, so I'm going to give it to you in the first 2 minutes, and then you could take a nap or pretend you're going to the bathroom but then sneak out, you know, if that's your plan. I'm going to give it to you right now. And I just drew these two little things up here. So I'm a guy who is a strong proponent of a physically active lifestyle. And I'll give you a little of the background as to how I came to understand that by virtue of my own personal career. I think it's one of the most important things we can do to lengthen both the duration, but most importantly, the quality of our lives. Much more than the years, it's the quality of those years. And the research is clear on that, and I'd be happy to chat with you as much detail as you want on that. So that said, I know some of the leading researchers in the field. There's a woman at Harvard University, her name is Ai-Min Lee, who's done some of the most compelling research and published these really elaborate technical papers in which they look at population data on who lives longer and who has shorter lives, who's at greater risk for cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes or osteoporosis, and who is at lower risk. And all of that stuff, this research, literally a career of research, she's boiled down to a simple phrase about physical activity. She says, some is better than none, more is better than some. So if you're doing nothing, if you have no physical activity in your life at all, anything you do is better for you than doing nothing. Some is better than none. Anything. There are people who say, but I don't have a half an hour or an hour to go to the gym, or I get really sore if I try to walk more than 20 minutes. Can you walk 3 minutes? Can you walk a minute? Anything is better than zero. There's more and more research on that all the time. And then her second point is, there appears to be what a researcher would call a dose response, meaning the more you do, the better you get. You know, the more you get from it. So if you can do 10 minutes comfortably, that's better than doing only 5. And if you can do 20, that's better than 10. The interesting thing is, it can be broken up. We have more and more research that tells us being physically active all at once is not the critical thing. It's just accumulating it over your day. So again, her second point is more is better than some. Some is better than none, more is better than some. So if you don't remember anything else I say, remember that. Because if you woke up every day just remembering that and thought to yourself, will I get at least some physical activity a day? Will I get at least the 5 minutes Mark Fenton challenged me to get? Remember that if that's all you got, it's better than if you got none. Everybody good on that? Comfortable with that first point? Furthermore, if later in the day you say, wow, my schedule's cleared up, I've got 10 minutes, I could add to my 5 that I did earlier and end up with 15 minutes today. And Mark told me more is better than some, so I'm going to go get the extra 10 minutes. That may sound extraordinarily simplistic. It is the culling down, though, of literally a couple of decades worth of very compelling research on physical activity and the human body, basically, and the human condition. And I think it's a great summary. So I thank Dr. Ai-Min Lee for that, but I tell you that all my research and work in the field agrees. So that's point number 1. If you, again, you're this close to nap, okay, or walk sneaking out. So I'm going to give you point number 2 right now. Point number 2 is essentially this. We know we should be physically active. I've just told you that. Unfortunately, most of us are not. If you look at national data on this, an astonishingly small percentage of society meets national physical activity guidelines. I'll tell you what those are in a minute. But the point is, we should be active, and for the most part, as a society, we are not meeting the recommended levels of physical activity. Furthermore, having told people that doesn't seem to be changing that very much. So people like me that worked in health promotion for the last 20 years haven't seen the data change very much, the percentage of Americans meeting guidelines. The thing that has, interestingly, made a difference, so telling people, not helping, building communities where being physically active is a part of your lifestyle has been effective. We can actually look at differences across cities and towns across the United States. And those that are better designed for physical activity tend to see more of the population being physical active, and therefore things like lower obesity rates, lower rates of cardiovascular disease risk, higher rates of routine walking and bicycling. Based, we think, pretty strongly on the design, the very nature of the community. So, when I tell people to think about how to bring this into their lives, I tell them, don't just think about yourself. Sure, I want you to try to be a little more physically active. That would be a good thing. But you really should think about your family and friends. And quite frankly, you should be a voice for positive change in your community. Because if you're going to be successful long term, you want to live in a community where the community by its design, by family and friends. Lisa's story is compelling because she says living in a neighborhood where there were others ready to walk our kids to school together made it easier to do than if any one of our families tried to do it alone. Right? That's the family and friends example. And then you yourself. Okay? This, by the way, is a very simplistic picture of a model that behavioral psychologists would call a socio-ecological model for behavior change. Now that sounds really wonkish, but what it says is we can't just focus on the individuals. We have to create a society where the healthy behavior is the natural outcome. A great example of that, one you might not even think of, but it was a conscious public health campaign of the last 20 years, is smoking. In our society, we don't just say, don't smoke, it's bad for you. We've made it hard to smoke in public places, right? We have the smoking bans on airplanes and things like that. We've taxed the product very, very much, right? We've taxed cigarettes. They don't advertise cigarettes on television. You guys remember when, TV ads, they were ubiquitous. You saw it everywhere. We've been very strong on enforcing the ban on the sales to minors. We've done a bunch of things on that outer ring at the community level to make it easier to be a non-smoker than a smoker. Everybody follow that? Yeah. We see the same with regard to nutrition. Communities where they have a great farmer's market, where the grocery store has a really good produce section, where they have healthy choices readily available and at a reasonable price. So whole grain breads. In fact, even subtle things, you ready for this? Like where they put things on the shelf. It turns out if they put the skim in the 1% milk at eye level, and the higher fat milk not at eye level, people tend to buy it more readily. Right? If they make a nice display with the produce, right, so that it's appealing looking, and maybe they give you some preparation tips, like here's how to prepare okra, or here's a great way to use kale. So, words that, foods that you're thinking, I don't even like that. And they tell you healthy ways to prepare it, right? And they make it easy. Then you're more likely to do it. So all of these elements that we're talking about, creating an environment that encourages the healthy choice, actually makes a difference. I would submit to you, if you're the kind of people that are forward-thinking enough to be at an event like this, right, and take part in a program like this, you also can be the people that could help be positive forces in the community. Be the voices that speak up for the kinds of things that I'm talking about. So that's kind of the big setup. My piece is, 1, be physically active. Some is better than none, more is better than some. And 2, it's really not just all about you. I want you to change your behavior, but to be successful, you really should engage the people around you and the very community that you live in if you're going to be successful in the long term. One last point on that. What we have learned, and this is my field of research, this is what I do. I go all over the country working. I was just down in Atlanta working with the Centers for Disease Control, literally yesterday, on planning a training for people from around the country. It's going to be a competitive grant process where they bring teams from communities around the country to do a week of training with us on these very principles. What we know is that the benefits of building communities that are encouraging for the healthier lifestyle, for easier walking, for example, or easier access to healthy food choices, have what we call triple bottom line benefits. They tend to do better as communities overall. So, for example, not only are the people healthier, they're out walking more, they're eating more fruits and vegetables, but the economy is healthier because they are very desirable places to live. The business districts, which are designed in a walkable way, invite people to shop at multiple locations. So when I go to the store, I don't just stop at the one store and then hop back in my car and escape as quickly as possible because it's a horrible mall parking lot and I hate being there. Rather, it's a lovely main street, think a front street, where it's walkable and it's easy to park in one spot and then walk to 3 or 4 stores. They're more economically vibrant. We even see housing values are healthier in those kinds of communities, right? Because they're so desirable now. And then they are environmentally healthier. So the things we do to design communities I've just described, for example, people driving less means there's less congestion and the air quality is better. You create less stormwater runoff with contaminants from our cars. So building this more walkable world that I'm describing, because that's really what I'm saying. Let's build a world where walking is the default. It's easy. It happens all the time. Those are healthier, not just from a public health standpoint, but from an environmental and an economic standpoint. People that do research in this field are calling this the triple bottom line. You get this triple win. They are the kinds of places in which the very things you've been talking about, it's easier to age in place. Because if I build a community where it's easy for me to walk, even when I'm not driving anymore, or if I've got a nice transit system, so think the Sloop, right? It might be an example, then it means I can stay in the home that I've lived in for a lot of years because I can still walk to a friend's house. The streets are inviting for me to be engaged socially in the community. I've got transit so I can get to the grocery store, to the senior center, to the bank, the post office. Those are not trivial things. It turns out we see differences between communities and those kinds of things, quality of life, aging in place, based on design. That's a big mouthful, isn't it? It's like I'm saying, man, wow, make a walkable world, you save the planet, right? It sounds pretty, quite frankly, I believe that's true. I think some of the biggest things we're challenged by, from global warming to sort of the success of our local cities and towns and urbanization and suburbanization, all of those things are related to how we design our cities and towns and whether we make them walkable or not. So, and here's the shocking thing. There must be some truth to that because I've made a career out of actually working with cities and towns across the country trying to actually make a difference in that arena, trying to do something about it. So there are a lot of other people who think the same thing, including mayors and city councils and groups like the Centers for Disease Control and the U.S. Department of Transportation, which are agencies that I work for on this stuff. So I may not be as crazy as you might think. Indeed, you ready for this? September 9th, Surgeon General of the United States came out with a statement. It was called the Surgeon General's Call to Action. Now, let me tell you an interesting thing about the Surgeon General. Surgeon General does not make a call to action or a statement about something until the preponderance of evidence, the research, the high quality evidence is so clear that the conclusion they're drawing is undeniable. So, for example, even though we knew cigarettes killed us in the 1950s, right, the research was fairly clear. Cigarettes cause cancer and things like that. Not until, I think it was 1964, did the Surgeon General come out with a report that called the Surgeon General's Report on Smoking and Health that said fundamentally, cigarettes kill us, we really shouldn't smoke. Right? They waited until there was so much evidence that it was undeniable, that even the industry deniers couldn't convince us that, no, smoking might be okay. So, know that that's the standard. Now, the Surgeon General has come out on statements on important things over the years on many topics, on nutrition, on breastfeeding, because we know, for example, kids do better if they're breastfed because they get the antibodies from the mom, and it turns out that there's lower obesity risk in both the parent and the child. So, there's also, and only when the research is clear. September 9th of this year, the Surgeon General came out with a statement called the Surgeon General's Call to Action on Walking and Walkable Communities. And it said basically two things. Said my two things. I'm very proud because I've been working in this field for 20 years. And many of us have been trying to convince national agencies to make this kind of a statement. Here are the two things. He said, one, we have to convince people to walk more because it's the easiest, least expensive, simplest form of physical activity. There are the fewest barriers. You don't need a membership at a club. You don't need special training. You don't need really complex equipment. You don't need a coach or a leader necessarily. You can do it yourself. So more walking. That was point number one. Point number two, we have to build a more walkable world. Too many of us live in places where, although we might like to walk, it's dangerous. There's not a sidewalk, the traffic is too fast, the roads are too wide, there are no destinations nearby to walk to. That those various barriers, and lots of them, actually have to be overcome. So I'm going to actually share with you my prescription because I have a pretty clear picture of what it takes to build a more walkable world. So I'm going to offer that to you before we conclude today. But the Surgeon General's Call to Action was a really big deal. For that to come out this September, sort of was a statement from the nation's top doc, as they call him, that if we really want to deal with health and healthcare costs in this country, we can keep arguing about whether Obamacare is a good or a bad thing, whether we should expand Medicare or not. None of that will matter. Let me be very clear about this. Those are the wrong things to be arguing about. I mean this. I go to red states and blue states, and they wanted the, some of them say how horrible, the Affordable Care Act was, and some say how great it was, and I say, wrong thing to be talking about. We have to talk about the three things that fill our hospital beds and that are crushing our healthcare system. And they are the root causes of the bulk of illness in our modern society. Tobacco use, because sadly still something like 17% of the population smokes. Tobacco use, poor nutrition, because we still know that a large portion of the society doesn't even get the 5 fruits and vegetable servings a day that is recommended. You all know that, right? The 5 fruits and vegetables at minimum, and many people say you should get more like 7 servings. And the third one would be physical inactivity. Those are the big three. Let me say it again. Tobacco use, poor nutrition, physical inactivity. Let me tell you the story on physical activity, a little more data now, just so you kind of have a picture. Guidelines came out in 2008, and I was actually one of the contributors, as were many others that work in this field, that said basically this: the research is clear, and we know that ideally you would get as a minimum about 30 minutes of physical activity a day. 30 minutes, about a half an hour. They actually touted it as 150 minutes a week, and that's another way to think about it. But getting out for a walk for a half an hour, 5 days a week, 5 times 30, 150. Some people say, but what if I'm a person who can go for a 45-minute walk on the weekend, but the rest of the days I can go 15 minutes? I say, fine, you'll get your 150 minutes. Think in terms of, though, an average of about 30 minutes a day or 150 minutes a week. That's enough, the research tells us, to reduce your risk for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, clinical depression, dementia in old age. People who are physically active maintain full mental faculties longer. A growing list of cancers. The American Cancer Society now lists physical inactivity or a sedentary lifestyle right next to smoking as a risk factor for cancer. Every time a new study comes out where they compare people who walk regularly versus those who don't, the walkers are more healthy. I mean, the data is unbelievably clear on this. Furthermore, you don't have to do it all at once. It doesn't have to be structured exercise, so don't think go change your clothes into your walking gear and go out and do a Mark Fenton power walk. That's not what it means. You can do that if you want, but it says just getting out and accumulating 30 minutes over the course of the day. So, if we walked our kids 10 minutes to school in the morning, if then at lunchtime I went and walked 10 minutes for errands, go to the post office and back, and then in the evening walked the dog for 10. If I accumulated that 30 minutes, I get all those benefits of reduced risk for chronic disease and an early death. That's pretty compelling, because it means that doesn't seem that overwhelming, right? Quick side note, the research also said kids need more like an hour a day, right? More like 60 minutes, and these are minimum recommendations. We know, remember, more is better than some? We know that kids who get 2 and 3 hours of physical activity a day are even healthier. Greater bone, bone density, muscle development, all those kinds of things. But at least an hour a day for kids, 30 minutes a day for adults. That's the good news. In this, I think that's good news because it seems like a pretty attainable goal. Especially if it doesn't have to be all at once. If you could get 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. That doesn't seem that overwhelming, does it? Okay, good. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Here's the problem. When we look at the research, maybe 20% of Americans meet that guideline. 1 in 5. And there are some studies that suggest it could be as low as 1 in 10. And if you think about it, if it were 50 or 60% of Americans, the streets would be full of people walking all the time. And that's not what you see. What you see is streets full of cars, right? Our modern way of getting around is the automobile. That's the way it's evolved. Nobody's fault, not blaming anybody. It's just kind of the reality we've come to. That's a pretty dramatic change. It only happened in the last 50 or 80 years that we became that. From an evolutionary standpoint, from the standpoint of us as a species, it's a blink of an eye that we've become dependent on the car. Up until a century ago, we were physically active not because somebody told you to exercise, go to the gym, get your 30 minutes, because it's the nature of your work, right? What we did was physically active, whether it was farming or working in industry, you were physically active. It doesn't happen that way anymore. So, fewer than 10% meeting the 30-minute per day recommendation. The third number that sticks in my mind, if you think about 30, 20, 30 being 30 minutes a day, 20 being the percentage maybe meeting the guidelines, probably lower, 365. And unfortunately, that's net days of the year. It's estimated that there are 365,000, so add 3 zeros, premature deaths annually that are effectively attributable to physical inactivity. Now, it's manifest as cardiovascular disease, the complications of hypertension or diabetes, the complications of osteoporosis. So an elderly person breaks a hip, they're relegated to a hospital bed. Now, it's eventually pneumonia or something that kills them. But indeed, it was the inactive lifestyle that led to the sedentary life, to the broken hip, right? I mean, it's that sequence. I'm not trying to paint an unhappy picture. I'm just trying to tell you, this is what we know. Being sedentary is really, really costly, just from an individual standpoint. Right? So it is the best buy in medicine would be to get everybody. In fact, let me say it this way. There is a colleague who has actually said, if I could, I would make a pill that I give to people and I say, this pill will add years to your life and your quality of life. It'll reduce your risk for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, clinical depression, dementia and old age, cancer. Everybody say, I want the pill, I want the pill. I say, the only complicating thing, I'm going to give you a 365-day supply of them. Here it is. So you can take it for the next year. All you have to do, take that pill with a 30-minute walk every day. Guess what it would have to be in the pill? Nothing. It would be a placebo, right? And if, that would be the answer. And there are people for whom that would work, by the way. Good, I take my pill, go for my walk. Boy, this pill is amazing. I'm feeling energetic. My mental health I'm more alert, right? My back isn't as sore. I feel so strong. This pill is a miracle worker. So if that would work for you, do that, Make your pill a Cheerio. Every morning, take a Cheerio with a 30-minute walk. You'll live a longer, healthier life. In fact, maybe that's going to be my next campaign, the Cheerio Save Your Life campaign. That would be great. All you have to do is eat a Cheerio a day, the Cheerio a day, or maybe it's the Apple a Day program. Eat an apple every day. Always take it with a 30-minute walk. Questions on what I've said so far? Thoughts, comments, protests? Yeah, please.
Does it have to be a very brisk pace?
Excellent question. I'm going to hold that thought and see what the next one is. So, question about speed.
Mine was the same thing. How aerobic?
Does it have to be really vigorous? Good. Okay, good. Other questions? Similar, different. Okay, good. So that's a great question. Back in like the 70s and 80s, the early research in exercise science was all about FIT, we called it, frequency, intensity, and time. And we were trying to convince people that they had to measure their heart rate and get to a certain level. You maybe heard things like get to your target heart rate and try to maintain it there for at least 15 minutes. Do that at least 3 to 5 days per week. Two things. First of all, those kinds of guidelines were really, so to give you a sense of my perspective on this, I actually lived and worked at the U.S. Olympic Training Center out in Colorado Springs, Colorado, both in 83, 84, and in 87, 88. I was a competitive race walker of all bizarre things. You know that odd-looking thing they do in the Olympics? It looks like this? I actually competed on the U.S. team and didn't make the Olympic team, but I made a number of other international squads. I went to Germany and Mexico and France and competed on the U.S. team. And the only reason I'm telling you that is, so I studied this stuff. That's what we studied at the Olympic Training Center, sort of what does it take to get to a certain level of fitness, aerobic conditioning. And that's how we got into that whole notion that you had to get your heart rate to a certain level and maintain it for a certain amount of time. And indeed, I will tell you that sort of the argument was that for aerobic fitness, right, to sort of improve your ability to sort of climb the stairs really quickly and not get winded, or go kick the soccer ball with the kids. So aerobic fitness, which is different than reducing your risk for disease. Let's separate those. Fitness, like muscle tone, not getting winded, aerobic capacity, the ability of your lungs to process oxygen really, really quickly, that's one standard. Reducing your risk for chronic disease is a different one, like reducing your risk for cardiovascular disease. To do this, you do have to get your heart rate to a certain level, maintain it for probably about 15 minutes or 20, multiple days per week, at least 3 and as many as 5 days per week. And that will also reduce your risk for disease. So you get the benefit of health, but that's really fitness. At what I would call the middle level for health benefits, intensity is less important. But I would tell you this. Think in terms of it not being window shopping speed. We often talk about getting at least to 50 to 60% of your maximum heart rate. Moderate intensity is what a physiologist would call that. Window shopping pace is this. Walking along, stopping, looking, talking about what you see in the window, walking again. That's not maintaining your heart rate at even a moderate level. Walking with purpose, like I'm going somewhere. I'm not late for something, which is this. I'm not that necessary. But I intend to get to the talk that Mark's giving in 15 minutes, and I'm 10 minutes away, and I don't want to be late. So I'm going to walk with purpose. That's one way to think about it. Can I talk comfortably? Absolutely. Am I winded? No. Do I notice that I'm breathing a bit? Fine. That would be good. Sort of say, walking along and saying, yeah, it's a beautiful day out here. I can't wait to get to this talk because I hear this Mark Fenton guy is very handsome as well as really interested, right? And if you were, breathing a little, that would be fine. Do I want you buckled over and, gasping? Not necessarily, right? So rather than thinking about a specific heart rate, we call that, by the way, the rate of perceived exertion. There's an acronym, RPE. And your rate of perceived exertion should be, sort of continuous effort, but not winded, uncomfortable, like that. Is that, and by the way, can everybody imagine what I'm talking about? By the way, let me make an important point. That's going to be really different for everybody. Somebody who's, sort of in super good shape and running every day, Lisa, she's going to have to go pretty quickly to get to that sort of meaningful movement level. Somebody who hasn't done anything since junior high school gym class, who's not a bad person. I'm just saying, if you haven't, then maybe just getting out for a stroll will be quite sufficient. And I always go back to, some is better than none. So if that's all you do, that's fine. Let me give you a quick glimpse into actually a new field that there's just research coming out on about sitting time. Has anybody heard about this research where they're now talking about the time we spend sitting? In modern society, we stay seated so much, particularly think in the automobile as well as in front of screens, you know, our life with every kind of screen, our computer, our television, we're just seated a lot. And it's not actually very natural for the human being. The human being was a fairly mobile species. You know, we were always moving. We were foraging for food, or later we were growing that food. Then we later were hunting that food. And then we became industrialized and we were still processing food, you know what I mean? And building the things that are our life. But all of that was physically active. Only in the last 50 or 60 years, as I said before, could we be as sedentary as we are. So there are now research studies, are you ready for this? That suggest even if you get your 30 minutes per day, if the rest of your time is sitting time, you may be at elevated, not maybe, you are at elevated risk. You know, the studies suggest. So, there are people who say the two things you have to do is try to get your roughly 30 minutes of physical activity a day spread out whenever you want, and two, minimize your long continuous periods of sitting. Let me say it again. Break up periods of sitting. It doesn't mean you got to get up and do jumping jacks, but literally, if you were somebody that's going to sit at your desk for 3 hours to do email, or you know, or you're writing or reading something or doing some research, get up at least 3 times during that 3 hours and take a lap around the house. Just break up long periods of sitting. Some people are doing things like putting alarms on their computer or on their watch so that it just warns them every 45 minutes, get up and do something. And again, that something could be go get a glass of water, but even just breaking up the sitting, a little more would even be better. So, thinking in terms of sedentarism, being sedentary, as a bad thing, both in sort of the big picture, do I get my 30 minutes a day, but also how much time am I just actually sitting still?
I have one more question.
Please.
About surface
Yeah.
shoes.
Good.
I have a friend that he was always walking and running, and he's had so many back problems because while he was running, he was around Scituate, he was not on a...
Well, the road is canted, and if you always run on the left side of the road as you're supposed to, facing traffic, that means that one leg is always this way it works. And if you do that for 40 or 50 years, it can work on you.
He had many back surgeries.
Yeah, very hard. So,
shoes and surface.
yeah. So the good news is walking, you are less susceptible to those problems than running. My bachelor's thesis at MIT, I studied this biomechanics at MIT, and one of the things we studied was the impact forces between your foot and the ground during various gaits, walking, running, race walking. I was studying race walking at the time because I was getting into it. Geeky, you know, I'm a nerd. I had to do that. I studied my sport. We learned that a person walking down the street hits the ground with about 1 times their body weight. So if you weigh 140 pounds, then every time your foot hits the ground, it's about 140 pounds of shock. But it's very gradual. It's not an abrupt shock, it's a load that comes on and unloads, sort of, because that's the nature of walking. You're not leaping in the air. Running, you hit the ground with as much as 3 and sometimes 4 times your body weight. So again, a 140-pound person, 3 times that is what, 520 pounds? That's a lot of impact every time you take a step, right? Bam, 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 3 times your body weight. Walking, even race walking at high speed, the impact forces were only 1.5 times your body weight. So they were still, so you could walk even vigorously, get your heart rate up. I mean, when we race walked, we got our heart rates up comparable to what elite runners do. We studied that at the Olympic Training Center. Even that, the forces didn't get up much above 1.5 times your body weight. The reason I'm saying that is, so the nature of the gait of running is potentially damaging, particularly on hard surfaces like asphalt and concrete, right? We probably didn't evolve running on asphalt and concrete. When we did run, we were on dirt and pine needles and leaves and, you know, the things that we sort of as a species evolved in. Furthermore, our body had a natural sort of cushioning mechanism, which is our ankle joint, which compresses and collects some energy, our knee joint, and our hip joint. All 3 of those joints, when you're running, are actually acting like a spring. You land, you hit the ground, they compress, and then you leap into the air. You uncompress. It's like a spring. In fact, your leg is acting like a pogo stick. Boing, boing. So it happens on every step when you run. And then you land on the other one. Boing, boing. That's why we can run faster than we can walk, because we get a little of the energy back. That actually is like a spring. You're stretching ligaments and tendons and things like that. But what you're transferring is a lot of impact up and down what we call the kinematic chain. All those joints and bones right up to the lower back. That 520 pounds, if that's what your number is getting transferred up. So, walking better than running is one of the takeaway lessons, and impact force is lower, even if I'm on hard surfaces. And to your question about shoes, there actually is a difference between a walking and running shoe. Oh, it's funny enough, look at this, I brought 2 shoes. Isn't that amazing that I happen to have these shoes? Because I knew somebody was going to ask that question. So, I actually have a rule for selecting walking shoes, and I call it the twist 'em, bend 'em, poke 'em rule. So I'm going to teach you this right now. I worked, by the way, a number of years at Reebok in their human performance lab, so I'm a shoe geek too. Yeah, I'm a nerd. And this, by the way, almost everything I'm telling you is in this book, which I wrote sort of at the end of my time at this magazine. There was a magazine called Walking Magazine, which was a health and fitness magazine, and they hired me to sort of be, this was after my time at Reebok, so I'm a shoe nerd, I'm a walking nerd, and they said, this guy would be great. I wasn't a journalist by training or a writer, but they said, he knows a lot about the stuff, so I became what they called the technical editor, or later the editor at large. It wasn't so much that I was a writing expert as an expert about the stuff of walking. I would go to the national conferences, I would talk to the shoe companies about their shoes. So anyway, this book was sort of a compilation of many of the articles and the stuff I learned. And again, I am donating it to the COA. My thought would be, if you guys keep it here, you can loan it out to people, you could use it, take a look at it. And there's a section in here on selecting shoes. So most of the, not most, everything I'm talking to you about today is in there if you wanted to look it up in more detail. But here's my twist 'em, poke 'em, bend 'em test. So he said, Mark, select a good walking shoe. I'd say, well, I would go to the store and I would ask the guy, what's your best walking shoe? And he'd say, what are you doing it for? I'm going walking for fitness. He said, I want you really in a running shoe. They have better cushioning. They're going to try to sell you. And that might be the right answer. So if you're going to do it, you're going to give it a test. And it's twist, bend, and poke. So number one is you're going to grab it at the heel and at the front and give it a little twist and see if it's got some torsional flexibility. You don't want it to be too rigid. This one, kind of stiff. This is a classic running shoe. I grab this one, pretty twisty. And you want a certain amount of twistiness, right? Because walking, again, I'm not hitting the ground that hard, so it's not about a big, thick, in fact, you can see the difference between these two. Much more cushioning material there, right? Because again, 4 times my body weight, 3 times my body weight versus 1.5. Okay, everybody seeing that? Got it? So it doesn't have to be super flexy, and some people want a certain amount of support, so you're going to figure out what's right for you. But don't feel, this shouldn't necessarily feel like a board. I want it to be flexible enough to, bend 'em is the second one. So I'm going to grab at the heel, push up at the toe, and I want it to flex where my foot naturally flexes, right? You'll notice most shoes now, athletic style shoes, but also shoes like mine. This is really not a running shoe. It's more of a light hiking shoe. It's a little lumpier, but it would pass my test. That's one of the ones that, when I bend it, it still flexes through the same part of where my foot flexes naturally, right at the base of the toes. Right? You do not, this is important, listen closely, you do not want it to flex easily through the arch. That's not where your foot naturally flexes. That can lead to a thing called plantar fasciitis, and it's very uncomfortable. So, it's why Peyton Manning couldn't play in the football game the other night. He has that very problem, plantar fasciitis, if you're a football fan. So, flex at the ball of the foot, not through the arch. So that's point number 2. Number 1 was a little bit of torsional flexibility. Number 2, flex here, not here. And 3, poke 'em. You really want, when you walk, your foot lands on your heel, rolls through, and rolls off. That's why we want that flex right here, the pushing off at the toe, right? When we land back on the heel, however, there's a moment where the thickness of the material back here acts sort of like a lever to try to push your foot down, because your ankle joint is up where my little pinky is, and this is like a lever down here. So the longer the lever is, the more it tends to cause your toes to go down. We have occasionally had people walk in running shoes with a big thick heel and say, my shins are getting sore. Why is that? Does anybody run into that, by the way? Sore shins when they're out walking? And that may come from having a big, thick running shoe style heel. Walking shoes tend to have a slightly lower or more rounded heel. And one of the ways I can see that is if I push a pen or a pencil back down in the very back of the shoe, right, try to push it to the ground, this one doesn't lift up that much. This one lifts up a lot more because this is more rounded back here to accommodate heel to toe roll. Everybody seeing this? Mm-hmm. So these are subtle elements of design, and some running shoes are actually good at this and some walking shoes aren't. So whether it's called a running or a walking shoe is less important to me than it passes my 3 tests, which are, again, some torsional flexibility, bends through the ball of the foot, not at the arch. In fact, one of my concerns about this shoe is it's flexible here, but it doesn't have a lot of support through there. So if I really push it, I can bend it in the arch. So it's not a lot. I mean, it still wants to bend at the right spot. I'd love it to have a little more support through here. And then number 3 was that rounded or beveled heel so that I can hit the ground like this and not cause my toes to slap down. So remember, I poked it back here, and what I'm looking for is the toes to come off the ground because it's rounded back here. Mm-hmm. Did everybody see what I was just talking about? Could you visualize it? I don't know if I was holding them in a way. Questions?
Just repeat that one more time.
Yep. So twist is looking for some torsional flexibility. Bend is good bend in the ball of the foot, not in the arch. Really important. If you pick the shoe up and go like this and it bends through the arch, put it right down. Don't do. I mean it seriously. That's big right now. These really minimalist shoes. Have you heard of the barefoot running movement? Or there's a book came out and that was kind of popular for really young, super athletic people who, by the way, have spent a lot of their time barefoot so that they've built up the intrinsic muscles of the foot. So my son wears one of these minimalist shoes that I could almost fold it up and put it in my pocket. He also, literally even now as an adult, he's 20 years old, sophomore in college, essentially his goal is to be barefoot from April to November, basically. He's built up the calluses on the bottom of the foot, the natural muscles of the foot. He's got nice, strong feet. And so his feet act like the natural cushions that they were designed to. Most of us who've spent our lifetime in shoes, that's gone away. Our feet don't act that way. And to suddenly put on these barefoot or minimalist shoes and go running can really lead to injuries. I'm not saying it can't work, but you have to build the musculature of the foot. So be careful about the total minimalist shoes that have very little material underneath, if you've seen that. Sir?
Are there any brands that are better than others that we should avoid?
It's a great question. And unfortunately, I can't give you a blanket answer because I know enough about the industry. I worked at Reebok, but when we were at Walking Magazine, we literally reviewed all of the walking shoes every year, did a big lengthy review and tested them all. And some years Asics would do really well, other years New Balance would do really well. I can tell you some of the brands that have historically sort of do well, like Asics, New Balance. One of the reasons New Balance regularly did well was they have width sizing. Have you guys ever noticed that? So you can buy a double E if you've got a wide foot or an A. And that matters because, you know, not all our feet are the same width. In fact, your left and your right probably aren't, but at least you can match it up better. So I'm a big fan of those. I've become a fan of Merrell, of all things. I like some of their hiking. I don't know, you kind of have more of a hikey type shoe than less of an athletic shoe. Do you know what brand those are? If you can peek on the back, I'm just curious. Because I've found that they perform very well in some of our tests. And the tests were, by the way, wear tests. We put the shoes on a lot of people. However, there are, you seeing it or no?
Land's End.
Oh, all right, yeah. So here's what's happened. Land's End or REI, which is, you know, the REI is up at the Derby streets there. Many of them have made their own brands. Often, that means their own name, you know, they put their own thing. They're often made, not often, they are usually made in the same factories that Nike and Reebok and Merrell and Timberland are making theirs, you know, and so they're using similar techniques. So unfortunately, I can't say this brand great. I can tell you though, my selection criteria, I'd use these, and when you go to buy, if you go to a place, I'd recommend going to a place where you can try them. You know, we want to buy mail order, they're cheaper. First, figure out the shoe that works for you. So go to an REI. Like REI I love only because when I'm buying my hiking shoes, they'll let me pull 6 models out if I want to try them all. And I'm tromping around in there, and then they've got this little slopey thing, so it's like you can test if you were hiking, going up or downhill. And I do that. I try to jam my toes into the end going downhill. So I do all of this testing. And what I'm looking for is which model's fitting my foot the best. And that should be your criteria. That should determine your... So my son loves the shape and fit of Nikes. They fit his foot really well. Don't really work for me. I've done well with Asics. My wife, I think, was using some Saucony. Do you know that name? S-A-U-C-O-N-Y. And they fit her very well. My daughter, I'm trying to remember, she's running in an Asics right now. This might be one of her pairs. My point is only fit first, before brand even. Try multiple. My rule of thumb is I always try at least 3 different models on at the store. So I'll try a Solomon. They do these for hiking shoes. A Solomon, a Merrell, and a Keen. Have you seen Keen? K-E-E-N-E? More like hiking shoes than running shoes. Trail running shoes they do. By the way, there's a category called trail running, which I find are often good walking shoes because they don't tend to put quite as much thick material back here, because when you're running on trail, you don't need as much cushioning, right? Remember the 3 times body weight? Less of an issue when you're on sand or dirt or pine needles. So, one category to try, and for the winter in New England, a trail runner is often a good walking shoe choice. So, I might go into one of the stores, whether it's Marathon Sports or one, and say, I'd like to try on 2 or 3 of your trail runners. I'm actually going to use it as a walking shoe through the winter. And they'll say, good, let me get you a couple different models, get a couple different brands, and feel which one, because you might be wide in the front of the foot but a skinny heel, or you might be the opposite. Every shoe's built a little differently. It's going to feel differently. So select on fit, and my 3 criteria, which are what? I want you to say them back to me right now. Twisted, a little bit of this. Bend, you said, and what am I looking for? Yeah, I want the bend here. Where do I not want it to bend? In the arch, right? And poke. And what am I looking for there? The roll. That's it. That's the way to think about it. That roll. You want that nice roll, and this one shows me a little more. When I push back in here, it's gonna give me that roll a little more.
What about the tread?
Really widely variant. I think more about season. So this is kind of a summer shoe, but these are trail runners actually, and you notice them a little more lumpy, a little better grab. It's the other reason I like a trail runner for the winter, because you got a little more tread, a little more grip on snow, ice. Have you seen, by the way, does anybody have or seen the tracks things that you can put on your shoe?
Yeah.
They are, after a winter like last winter.
Good for just shoveling.
Yeah. I almost killed myself walking the dog to the beach on a day I didn't put them on. I slipped right on our hill. I almost,
I highly recommend them.
Yeah, so do you guys know what we're talking about? I just started. So they're stretchy things. REI definitely has them. LL Bean's got them in the catalog for sure. They're in the catalog. They're in the REI catalog too. And they call them, do they call them Trax? That's one of the brands.
Might be a brand.
Say it again?
TRAX.
TRAX is one of the brands that I know. Do you guys know what we're talking about? It's like a rubber stretchy thing with little, it's almost like what we used to do, chains on tires. Remember when we put the chain? It's chains for the bottom of your shoe. And they're little grippy things, basically.
How often should you change your shoe?
Ah, great. I'm glad you asked. I can't forget. So we often talk in terms of mileage, but I think that you got to be careful about that, because if you're not walking millions of miles, then you don't. So the rule of thumb was often 300 to 500 miles. And if you keep a log and look at that, you think, my God, that's infinity. I'll keep those shoes forever. It would take me forever to walk fine. The problem is the foams tend to break down over time. So even if you're not, the foams that make up the cushioning. So some people are adamant that it should be every 3 to 6 months. Bear with me. That's for the serious runner who's running all, going out 4 or 5 days a week, really putting through the abuse, not letting them recover, because it turns out that a shoe cushioning actually rebounds a little the day after you use it. More important for running than walking, because the impact forces aren't great. So that 3 to 6 months is for them. I say 6 months to a year is more the time frame, but really a year is probably about it. And I know you're going to say, God, these shoes, they don't even look marred after a year. The problem is, it's not what visually has happened to them. It's not about the material peeling or poking. It's the fact that the foam is beginning to lose some of its cushioning. So nominally, I say a year. Having said that, one way to extend the life of a shoe realistically, couple of things. One, don't let them leave them sitting wet after you've used them. So on a day you come in from one of the rainy days, pull the little liner thing out, stuff it with newspaper, right? And the newspaper sucks the water out of it. It helps the adhesive, because there's all these adhesives and things like this. Let this thing sit out here and dry, and you'll, in 24 hours, the shoe will be dry if you stuff it with newspaper. I know that sounds geeky, but it's worth doing. And second, I alternate pairs. So I tend to have 2 pairs. When I'm training seriously, and I use one on days 1, 3, 5, and the other pair on 2, 4, and 6, allowing the shoe to recover between. Furthermore, in this climate, if it got wet on Monday, I stuff it with paper. By Wednesday, it's nice and dry, and it's ready to be used again. So, and I know that sounds more expensive, but you're going to extend life. You're going to use them twice as long, right? If you're using it every other day, then I say keep it longer. Okay, so everybody following the rationale there behind that? The one nice way to do that, here's the interesting way. What I do is I'll have a shoe, wear it for a while. This is exactly what I do with the running shoes. I run with Lisa, with my daughter Sky, a lot, and we check up on each other. How are they feeling? So what I do is I have my new pair that I'm running in, and I'm running in those most days of the week. Now they start to get a little older. I get a new pair, and I start using them on the alternate days. So, means old shoe Monday, new shoe Tuesday, old shoe Wednesday, new shoe Thursday. What happens is I start to notice a difference. If the day I put on my old shoes, I'm going, oh man, these don't feel so good. They're not feeling cushioning. Or after my run, I'm feeling like, that's a sign that the cushioning is shot, right? Because I'm noticing the difference between the older shoe and the newer shoe. So having 2 going that I didn't buy at the same time, but are staggered. So I always have 2 shoes going, but they're often staggered in purchase by about 6 months. And when you notice the older shoe feeling less comfortable, less cushiony, your foot doesn't feel as good after a walk in it, that's the time to retire it and get a new shoe to become the new shoe. Now what was your new shoe becomes your old shoe. You're still wearing them on alternate days. Does everybody understand that? That's a little complex. It sounds nerdy, but it's a great way to extend the lives of shoes and keep your feet nice and healthy. Because your feet, they really matter. They start to hurt, you're going to stop walking, and then you lose all those other benefits that I was talking about.
Is there a higher impact walking on a treadmill?
No, not necessarily, but it's a kind of an unforgiving surface. Most treadmills, you know, they have no give at all. So compare that to walking on one of the trails. You know the little trail down by the Dunkin' Donuts? Does anybody walk back there? You know, the Dunkin' Donuts at the end of the driftway? It's really a nice level trail. It's not like there are lots of rocks and roots to trip on. I love walking there because it's soft, right? And it's so much more forgiving than, for example, a treadmill. Or at the Norris Reservation. I mean, there are places I like to go to, the Thayer and Whitney Woods, which is the one across from Stop and Shop on Route 3A. I don't know if you've ever been there. Or the Ellis Estate. Has anybody walked at the Ellis Estate, right? I love walking. You go back there, don't you? I've seen you back there. Great walking, and I love the softness of the surface. But anyway, so your question was treadmills. Say it again? Okay, so 4 of my nearby favorites. It's a half mile. At the end of the driftway, the Dunkin' Donuts on the left as you're leaving town, so train stations on your right, Dunkin' on your left, little parking area, very flat. This is a very flat and easy trail, and it goes out into the salt marsh. You get some amazing views out there. It's astonishing. You're walking from the driftway, busy traffic, Dunkin' Donuts, and all of a sudden you're back there and you go, oh my God, I feel like I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I'm almost out in the middle of the river. You know, you can walk. It's the old rail corridor. So anyway, that one, I love that. That's a great little walk.
With the boat parking ramp is there?
No, there are great trails there. No, this is further down. Go all the way down the driftway to where the Dunkin' Donuts is on the left. Right before that, there's a little parking area. Have you guys never noticed this? This is very cool. You should walk there because it's nice level trail too. If you're somebody, even if you're not very steady, if you're worried about tripping or you're walking with somebody who you're concerned about, that'd be a place I'd feel comfortable taking them. Do you agree, having been there? Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure I'm steering you right. So that's one of my favorites. Now, that's all the way at the end of the driftway, though. Dunkin' Donuts on the left, little parking area. There's a nice walking area before that as you're going down the driftway where the boat launch is, you know, where they put in kayaks and canoes and things. And I think it's just called the Driftway Recreational Area, and there's a nice walking path in there. In fact, one of the Boy Scouts some years ago, a kid we know, Marius Varner, as his Eagle project, sort of leveled that out and put gravel down on the trail. And then if you wanted to go more onto rougher land, but now that's sand and it's a little more bumpy, the trails go back further into the woods, again out into the salt marsh. So those are 2 very close locations. Third one that I like a lot, and Linda, you might want to weigh in on this, is the Ellis Estate. So the Ellis Estate, sadly, we're going to lose some of these trails, I think, with the public safety building that's going in there, but I think a portion will still be intact. And that's on Country Way, on the way toward North Scituate. It's on the left side. Have you guys ever noticed the green sign? Anybody walked there or been there? Okay. Yeah. These are rougher trails. Know that there are roots and rocks and things, so you're going to walk slowly, carefully. But I love it. It's a neat spot. Then the other 2 I mentioned that are out of town but are just lovely places. One is called the Norris Reservation. That's on Route 123 toward Norwell. It's on the left side, right there. You've been? It's sort of at the place that 123 branches, and you either go up the hill into the little downtown or left on what's called River Street. It's just there to the left, sort of opposite the post office. And lovely trails, and those are relatively level. There's a section you can walk. There's some beautiful boardwalk back in there. And then the other one I mentioned was Thayer and Whitney Woods, which is right across from Stop and Shop on Route 3A. So as you go north on Route 3A, Stop and Shop in Cohasset on your right on your left, a little parking area. These last 2, by the way, have green signs that are from the trustees of reservations. So you'd see this distinctive green sign. One's called Norris. The one in Cohasset is called Thayer and Whitney Woods. Really loving, just great walking assets. And it gets you off the road if you want that, if you want a little different environment. And in a place like that, I would add this, and then I want you to weigh in.
I have a favorite, but I have a brain freeze on the name. It's in the West End. It's named after a dog.
Oh.
I just can't think. I think it's Maxwell something.
Yeah, Maxwell Reservation. That's right. The trail is oh my God, after the guy.
Yeah.
Carl Pipes.
That's it.
Carl.
Pipes.
So it's Carl Pipes Trail. It's a great trail. You know where that is?
Yes.
And it's right, if you go to the Mount Hope Improvement Society, remember the old little building there? Okay, what road are we going down? So we're driving down, oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed. Clapp, it is Clapp. So you're driving down Clapp, come to the branch where the old Mount Hope Improvement Society building is in the center. You can either park there. I think is that the easiest place to park at the little building?
What I do is I take a left on opposite Mary Lou's.
Oh yeah.
And then if you go through the blinking light and go straight.
Yes.
And then you is it Clap Road you get to?
Yeah, that is Clap that you come to and you turn right.
You're going to see the trail is on the right, but the parking is marked on the left.
Yeah, there's a little parking area on the left. Yep, and that's lovely. And that's land, by the way, that we as a town thankfully have protected, and because it's important watershed, and it also is kind of easing development out in that area, which is a high impact area. It's really, really, it's a great trail. Carl Pipes Trail. Good, thank you for helping me remember that.
He's saying Pike, P-I-P.
Pipes. P-I-P-E-S, yeah.
We're so lucky to have that Norris Trail. That's gorgeous.
It is.
In the winter when the leaves are gone and the views of the river.
Now, when you see the North River, that's really true.
Yeah, it's, I just always feel so lucky to live in this area when I go.
Yeah.
Could you comment on shoes for plantar fasciitis or any hints for
Yeah,
dealing with it?
So the big, okay, there's, in the book, there's an entire section. I wrote a thing about treating plantar fasciitis. Check your shoes and see if they're bending at the middle. That's the first thing. That's what tends to precipitate it, or can. So there's a regimen of treatment for it that includes, depending on how bad it is, maybe anti-inflammatories, because plantar fasciitis, itis is usually inflammation. Plantar fascia is a sheath over the essentially the tendons across the bottom of the foot. I'm grossly oversimplifying. Some orthopedists will be looking at this going, oh my God, he's cutting this to shreds. But fundamentally, there's this sheath surrounding the plantar fascia, which is this sort of tendinous tissue on the bottom of your foot. It gets inflamed, rubs on the sheath, gets irritated, more inflammation, and it becomes really chronic because and gets stiffer and stiffer over time. So you got to get that inflammation down. The best and most effective thing last time I got it that I did was took water bottles, not small ones like this, the tall ones. Took a little bit of water out, put them in the freezer and froze them. You have to take the water out because ice expands, water expands when it freezes. You'll blow the thing open. So take a little bit of water out. Now you got frozen water bottles is what you have. You put it on the floor, and while I'm at my desk working, I'm rolling my foot back and forth on that. The ice is in a nitron, so I'm getting both a massage, right? It's massaging the bottom of my foot, and it's doing it with ice, which reduces the inflammation. So icing the bottom of the foot and massaging it very gently like that, popping maybe some ibuprofen to break the inflammation, and then very gentle stretching. Funny you should ask. Mark, have you written anything about good stretching or warm-up moves for walking or anything like that? You know, it's so funny you should ask. In the book, I have exactly this stuff, but I'm going to give you each a copy of this, and I'm going to, oh, thank you, Lise. Let me grab a couple. Whoa! I'm going to give these ladies one and keep one for myself. So,
Could I have another one for people that are
yes, of course, we have plenty of extras, and also we'll leave copies here. You can make more. She's sending them out to everybody.
I'll take an extra. The Vibram yoga toe shoes.
Like the 5-finger ones, they don't give a lot of support, so they're fine if you've got strong feet, can do the barefoot thing, but effectively you're barefooted. I wouldn't be running in them, for example, and if you haven't strengthened your feet enough to be able to handle that, I would be very cautious. If you're, I mean, using it in a yoga class is one thing. Going out for a walk in it, I think, is really another. I'd be very cautious.
Or at home for a good, spread your toes.
Yeah. For around the house, in lieu of like a, instead of a slipper kind of thing, absolutely not an issue. But I just am very cautious about that because people have they've sold that as this is the new way we're gonna, we're gonna run and walk in these. Yeah, and I'm very hesitant about that unless you've conditioned your feet for it.
Have you heard of Atrex sneakers?
No. Atrex?
Yes.
No, I haven't. All right, so here's what I'm going to tell you. 2 of the ways to avoid plantar fasciitis and then to treat it after it's happened, or frankly any of the kind of chronic injuries that come with regular physical activity, are to warm up a little bit before you engage in that physical activity and to stretch very gently afterwards. Warm up before, stretch afterwards. So that's what this document has. I think one side is the warm-up. Yeah, there it is. So, and the other side is stretch. Wait, are the stretches on here? Yes, there they are. Good. Yeah, front and back. Just want to make sure. So, you guys want to try these? I think you should try them. How many of you are up for this? You could stand up and literally put your hand on the back of your chair and do the warm-ups with me. So let's try it. If you're up for it, go ahead and stand up, and you don't have to take notes because you have them. So I'm going to show you my the 5 warm-ups on the front of this. Okay, number 1 is ankle circles. So you're going to put a hand on something and stand with your chair to your side, and then lift up your foot and just make circles with your toe. So all you're doing is flexing the ankle joint. And make circles in one direction. You can do this seated, exactly. Circles with your toe in one direction. Do 4 or 5 to the right. And then stop. You're just getting the blood flowing. The notion of a warm-up, then go to the other foot and make 4 or 5 to the left. So you're really not moving a lot of the leg. It's really all you're just trying to get the ankle joint going. By the way, remember our sitting thing? If all you did when you were sitting at your desk was stand up and do these for a minute every, 40 minutes, it would be better than. Go back to the first foot and now make the ankle circles in the other direction. Make your circles in the other direction.
Would that help with tendinitis?
Yeah, absolutely. What you're doing is you're getting the blood flowing. So the reason we like warm-ups is they literally elevate the temperature of the tissue. Go to the other foot and make some circles in the other direction. You're elevating the temperature, you're increasing blood flow, the capillaries that go to that area are dilating, more oxygen, you're softening the tissue, so the tightness that comes with plantar fasciitis. Okay, go back to the first foot. Now we're going to go to the next exercise, which is called leg swings. Yes?
Question,
Yeah.
when you're doing those circles, what are you doing with your toe? Are you trying to...
To make as big an arc as possible. Yeah, and start with a small range of motion. So if I'm doing this and I've been sitting at my desk, I'm going to start with little circles, and then as the tissue warms up, I'm going to try to get bigger and really stretch with my toes, right? But you start very comfortably. Don't do anything extreme at the beginning. Now go back to your first leg, your right leg, or whichever one you started with, and just swing it from the hip. All you're doing is lifting your foot up and off the ground, and just enough to have it swinging from the hip. You're not trying to kick a football. Just trying to get the blood flowing now to some of the muscles further up the leg, around the hip joint. Your gluteus muscles, they're big ones. They want that. And then go ahead and switch. Stand on the other leg and do it again. And you're swinging that foot forward and back. I'll show you what I like to do, what Sky and I do before we go for a run. I'll go back to the first leg. Now this is a little trickier. I make a figure 8 with my foot. I go a loop in front and a loop behind. Because what I want to do is loosen up the hip joint a little bit. Got that? Because your hip is a ball and socket. It has a lot of flexibility. And generally we don't, so there it is. Yeah, you're doing it perfectly. Now go to the other leg. A couple of figure 8s. Again, circle in front, circle in back. You'll notice none of these are abrupt movements. You see how gently and slow, but we're getting the blood flowing. In fact, as we move up our body, I think you can notice even your heart rate gets up a little. Certainly more than when you were sitting still, right? These are all good things. And if that's all you did, Lise.
With the plantar fasciitis, I've got it.
Yeah.
To increase the blood flow to that injured area is what actually causes it, creates the healing, starts the healing.
It's taking out the damaged tissue, clearing it out. So anytime you increase blood flow, that's what icing is doing. By the way, you'll notice when you put ice on something, it turns pink. Because your body's natural response to the cold in there is, I got to warm it up, so I send more blood there. So one of the benefits, it reduces inflammation and increases blood flow. Hi. Hands on your hips. Now we're going to go up to the one called pelvic loops. Soften your knees and just make some circles with your hips in one direction. You're just kind of, that's your chair. So we're just making circles. Now, again, you're going to pick the range of motion. If I'm go to the track and see elite athletes warming up for hurdling, they're doing, they can do a great range of motion. You don't have to do that. Do whatever gets the blood flowing to the area. Okay, once you're gone, whatever number you've gone in the left, you have to go in the right to unwind, right? If you don't unwind, big problem. You'll only be able to walk to the left. You won't be able to turn right. So now you're making your circles the other way. Got it? Now we're going to move up the body a little bit more. Put your arms out like a letter T. Don't whack the person you're standing next to. And just make some small circles to the rear with your hands. If it feels comfortable, slow. We're not trying to do anything fast. You're not trying to take off. You're not running down the runway. So you're doing a slow movement just to get the blood flowing. Now think about it. You're getting your shoulders, upper back, chest, all these. If it feels comfortable, let the circle get a little bigger. Don't do anything that causes pinching or discomfort. And if it feels comfortable, finish up with a couple of back strokes. One to the right, one to the left. Excellent, Lorraine, by the way. Notice that Lorraine's doing almost all of these from the seated position. So in other words, she's breaking up sitting time with physical activity without necessarily having to stand, and that's perfectly good. Shake it out. We're going to do the same thing forward now. Slow, small. Remember, the movements are all slow and controlled. We're going to go with small circles forward. If it's comfortable, go ahead and get a little bit bigger still. And if it feels all right, no discomfort, a couple of forward crawl strokes. So we did the back stroke. Now we do the forward strokes. Yeah. Shake it out. Good.
We just added 5 minutes to exercise.
There it is. You already got 4 of your minutes in. This last one, only do it if you're comfortable, but the last one I do before vigorous activity, so I've now kind of moved all the way up my body, blood is flowing in a way it wasn't before when I was just sitting still, being sedentary. I do little, what I call hula hoop jumps. Watch first before you even try it. I'm bouncing in place, and then I start to rotate my hips left and right. Now why is that? Because when I walk, that's exactly what your hips do. If you think about it, right, your low back acts like an engine, and the piston is your hips going like this. It's a very natural movement, right? So I'm going to warm that up. And now I'm going to do the most dynamic thing, because I've done all my other little warm-ups along the way. I'm ready. The next thing I'm going to do is start my walking. Everybody got that? So this is my most vigorous, the end of my warm-up. So again, hopping in place, then rotating my hips left and right. Only do it if it's comfortable. If you're not steady, you can have a hand on something. And maybe you just want to do the hop. Maybe you want to do just a little bit of the movement. But the goal was shoulders forward, hips rotating. So I'm using what some people call the spinal engine, right? The engine of the spine, and warming it up. So questions on those? Everybody understand? Everybody breathing a little bit? Right? Wow, you did what we did. It's called a warm-up. Now you're warmer. I would feel more comfortable you starting a walk now than if you just stood up and went for the walk, because you've prepared your body. That's why athletes warm up. It reduces the risk of injury, prepares the body for... Now, I want to show you one last exercise, because I think this does help with the foot thing, foot health, called upside back downs. So I'm going to show you 4 positions. We're going to roll up on our toes, standing up. Then roll to the side of our foot. That is, we're going to roll our feet out as if you were twisting your ankle, but these are all gentle movements. Now back on your heel, back, so toes are up and down. Let's think about each of these positions. When I go up on the toes, I'm working the calf muscle and that plantar fascia, that's the thing that wraps underneath the heel, and stretching the shin. Now when I go onto the side, I'm stretching a lot of the same tissues that wrap around the side of the foot. Many of those tissues wrap over the top and underneath. Now I'm going to go to the heel position, toe up. Now I'm stretching the Achilles, the calf, the bottom of the foot, the plantar fascia, and I'm working the shin muscle. So everybody see how I did the point, counterpoint there? And then I relax, drop my toes, and that's the relaxed position.
So that's good for plantar fascia.
Yep, it's a good, not when it's hurting initially. You do this as you're rebuilding strength, after you've gotten over the pain phase. So first, it's rest, the rolling on the ice thing, taking the anti-inflammatories. That's what you do to get the pain away. Once you're past pain and you got to rebuild the strength and flexibility, this is a really good exercise for that.
How long do you hold each of the poses?
About a 2 count. So we're going to do a set of 5 right now, and you're going to follow me. So we're going to go up, 2, side, 2, back, 2, and down. That was 1. Got it? Now we're going to do it 4 more times. Up, side, back. Yeah, are you doing them? Good, Lorraine's doing them. Good, excellent. Down. Again, up. I do these on the airplane. When I'm stuck seated on the airplane, side. No, seriously, just to get the blood flowing. Back, down. Again, up, side, back, and down. Relax. Questions on that?
Sometimes I incorporate those little toe exercises, like when I'm prepping at the kitchen.
Yep. Yep.
Or even brush your teeth.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been known to pop on my toes and brush it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, then the last thing I want to show you, we're going to flip the sheet over after we walk. People say, should I stretch before exercise or stretch? I like stretching a lot. I like to do it when muscles are warm and pliable. After your walk is when they're most compliant. So, let me just show you the 3 stretches that I've described verbally here, but just so you see them. Number 1 is a calf and hip stretch, and you're welcome to try them. Now we're warm, so I'm comfortable. We've been moving, much more comfortable letting you stretch. I wouldn't say stand up and just start stretching. It's like taking the violin string that hasn't been right and pulling. So, but you've been doing something. So, I'm going to take a large step forward with one foot, keeping the other foot on the ground behind me. I'm going to keep the heel of the back foot on the ground. I'm going to bend the left knee to the point that it is above, but not beyond my foot. Don't push this knee past this foot. It's just vertical. The front shin is vertical. Back heel's on the ground. And I want to stay upright. I don't want to lean forward. I don't want to arch my back. I don't want to put a lot of sway. See this, the kind of sway back? No, I want to be tall. In fact, I actually consciously think about tightening my abs so that I stay nice and tall through here. What that gives me is a stretch here in the hip. You feel it on the leg that's back? Do you feel a little stretch here? And down there in the calf. So I call it a calf and hip stretch, because if you do this right and hold that position, the leg is straight behind you, you're getting both joints back at the heel. Again, good for the Achilles.
Also, to straighten that foot out.
Yeah.
If you look back and your heel's kind of tucked
Right.
in, kind of.
So you want both
out
feet-
Just a little bit. The tendency, I think, is to have it kind of angled.
Yeah.
I think it's better to.
Right. Line them up. So what Lisa's saying is front foot is pointed forward and back foot. Don't let this slide thing happen where your foot slides in or out.
Yeah, you get a better stretch.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. Everybody okay with that? You'll notice I'm just chatting away here. I like to hold a stretch for 15, 20 seconds. In other words, the goal is not to stretch for a second and move to the next one. Gentle, breathe deep. By the way, I say if you're doing this alone, you know, you're doing a nice couple, at least 5 or 6 really deep cleansing breaths in the position. Big exhale. So let's try the other side. We're going to do the same thing. Right leg's going to be forward. We're going to push the toes above the foot. The knee above the foot, not beyond. Back leg's flat on the ground behind us. Back foot, feet are lined up. Staying tall, standing tall, abs compressed. We're not arched forward, right? So you get that hip stretch as well as the calf back here.
Are you saying feet lined up like you're on?
Not in a line, no, not on the balance beam, but they're both pointing forward. They're not splayed or inward. Okay. But no, they're going to be aligned with your hips. Yeah, so they're, because your hips have width. That's right. Good. Ready? Okay, let's do the next one. We're going to go up. So, I call this the back and hamstring stretch. Okay, so this is, and it really is simple. Again, in the standing position, and I sometimes have to lay a hand just for balance on something. I'm going to take a small step forward now, okay? And I'm going to bend forward at the hip, leading with my chest. I'm not rolling my shoulders. I'm keeping my back straight, leaning forward, keeping and lifting the toes of that foot that's forward to the point that I feel a really gentle stretch back through the hamstring and low back. So this is not a lean way forward. I mean, there are more elaborate ways to stretch your hamstring, but this is a super simple one. Even on wet ground, you know, you don't have to get on the ground or anything. So again, it's small step forward, toe up, right leg straight, bend the back leg just a bit to soften the knee, and now we're going to lean forward from the hip, leading with the chest, back's flat. Now, are people feeling the stretch in the hamstring? I even think about looking at the ground like out 8 and 10 feet in front of me so that I've got a nice straight line from my ear through my shoulder right to my bum. Feeling that? You guys feeling that stretch?
Yeah.
Calf too?
You will feel it if you pull your toe up. In fact, one of the ways to adjust the intensity of this stretch is the more you pull up the toe, the more stretch you tend to get. The more you ease the toe down, the less. Does everybody feel that? Pull your toe up right now. Just gently pull it up. You feeling that? Okay, go. Switch legs. Small step forward. Soften the right knee. Now I've got my left leg forward, so I'm bending the right knee a little bit. Yeah. So and lift the foot. Yeah, lift the toe of the leg that's forward, right? And then lean forward gently with the chest. Look at the ground 10 feet in front of you. So your back is and your head and everything is nicely lined up. You getting this stretch or not? Are we feeling it? Mm-hmm. Again, this is post-walk. Muscles are warm. Never want discomfort while stretching. If there's pain, don't do it, or lessen it at very least. Lift the toes. Okay, relax.
Increase circulation to the hip as well.
Yeah, every time we're moving like this and we're moving those tissues, we're increasing blood flow, right? Because your body's response. One last one. Go. No.
Do you think even this activity in
Absolutely.
itself is
If you did this routine and it took you 6 or 8 minutes, you could put that to your 30 total for the day. I mean, that's the way to think about this stuff. You know, so the day that the winds are howling, you know, when we have like last winter, you say, I'm not going out there because I'm going to just fall and kill myself. I mean, there were days that I did a routine inside the house and I started it with the warm-ups and ended it with these stretches. Absolutely. So the last one is a shin and thigh stretch. This one can be hard depending on how flexible you're. So I'm going to just show it to you to decide whether you want to. I'm going to stretch my right thigh, so my hand's on my balance. I'm pulling my ankle up toward my butt. Now, important things about this. You're not trying to point the knee. Listen. Not trying to point the knee out or in. Trying to keep the leg vertical. Second, I did not say your heel has to come to your head. In fact, I know people for whom this is the stretch. So they're holding onto my pants cuff. Some people will use a towel and loop it underneath the foot so that the foot is only there. That's fine. There's not a point. The point you stretch to is the point where you feel a stretch and it's not painful. That's the rule for all of these. No pain, feel a stretch, right? For my daughter, she pulls her heel right up and her heel touches her hiney. And that's great. I'm glad she's that flexible. I shall never be again in my life. You know, that's about. The other thing you can do if you're comfortable doing it is by holding on your toe, you're also stretching the shin a little bit. Everybody see that? So each of these is a 2-joint stretch if you do it the way I described it. So in this case, it's thigh and shin. Okay, let's switch legs just so we are symmetric. So again, lift it. Again, pant leg is fine. Ankle if you can. Toe if you want to. Whatever gets you there.
They want to, but can't. Huh? They want to, but can't.
Yeah, right. Whatever you can comfortably. And when you're ready, put it back down.
Excellent.
Okay. Have a seat, relax. I'm going to make my final 5-minute point, and then I'm going to get out of your hair. Are we over time? Are we supposed to end at 11? Okay, I'm sorry. You can't shut me up. But here's my last point. I really do want to make a final 2 more points. One is that for some people, measuring their physical activity helps a lot. Has anybody heard of what a pedometer is? Has anybody, pedometer? So they're these little measurement devices you wear on your hip. I'm leaving 2 with the COA, which you are welcome to lend. I would urge you to do that actually, because I've found for people, so a pedometer is a little thing you wear on your hip. It measures your daily steps. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to open one up. You'll notice, by the way, it has a little leash. Here's one of the big problems with them. You put them on your hip like this, and it measures your daily physical activity, or your steps, the steps you take. Has anybody heard how many steps per day we're supposed to get? 10,000 is equivalent. 10,000 is roughly equivalent to the 30-minute recommendation. Remember 30 minutes a day? If you got 10,000 steps, I guarantee you got 30 minutes of physical activity that day. So it goes on your hip like this. Everybody seeing this? You open it up. There's one button. That's the beauty of this. Super simple. I press that button, it goes to 0. So the perfect thing to do would be to put this on my hip in the morning, start my day, press the button to 0. Close it up. Don't think about it again. You'll notice there's a leash. Here's why. The most common way of losing or destroying your pedometer is what? Dropping it in the toilet, specifically, and then it's done. So you clip it to your hip, so as you drop your drawers and it pops off of your belt by accident, you don't lose it, okay? So it's got the little leash. Everybody seeing that? Yeah. Okay? Now, I'm going to just wear it all day. La, 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 all day long. And at the end of my day, I'm going to open up and look and I go, oh, wow, 8,500 steps. That's pretty good. Mark wanted me to get 10,000, but 8,500 is better than 0 because some is better than none. And tomorrow, I might try to add 500 steps because more is better than some. So, Mark, is there a program? Is there a way that I might do this in an organized fashion? There certainly is. It's in this book, and it's on this piece of paper of which I am leaving you. It's a little 5-week pedometer program. Here's what I recommend you do. Take the pedometer, wear it for a week, not changing your life at all. Every day, start your day, reset it to 0. Do what you do in normal daily life. At the end of the day, write down on that day slot, because this is a 7-day week right here, how many steps you took. Right? So it's a Monday through Sunday. So you got only 1,200 steps that day. You did almost nothing. 1,200 steps. Fine, put it down. Don't go like, oh my God, I'm supposed to get 10,000 steps. Don't do that. Write down the 1,200 and be happy about it. Do that for a full week. Add it up and average and figure out what you're doing. Do I average 3,000 steps per day? 10,000, 20,000, whatever your number is. It doesn't matter. What matters is the next week, you now use your pedometer to try to increase your steps. You might do it by doing the little routine. The little routine we just did would get you several hundred steps. The act of getting up and moving around, and you'd be doing your hips. All of a sudden, you got 400 steps, right? As you were pointing out, that could be your routine. And it would be 400 more steps than you had the day before. If you did that every day this week, you would add 400 steps to your daily average, wouldn't you? Or if you went out for a 10-minute walk. So the idea is use this as a way to sort of measure your baseline first. What am I at now? And then try to increment it. It actually recommends multiplying your number from week 1 by 10%. So if in the first week you got 3,000 steps per day, in week 2 you might try to get 3,300. Meaning you could actually look at your pedometer. You could look at your pedometer at 5 in the afternoon and go, wow, I'm only at 2,800 steps. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to walk around the house 5 times. See if I can get a few hundred more steps.
Where can we get one?
Well, I'm leaving one here. I'm leaving 2 here, so you could borrow one from COA as one answer. But the problem is I hope more of them than you. And Marathon Sports has them. REI has them. Any sporting goods type store. Really important. Really important. Yes, I was just going to say that. Only buy the simple version. They have ones that do things like tell you the calorie counts and the distance estimates. It's all sorts of extra stuff. You pay for more, and it's not particularly reliable.
REI just have the one.
I don't know that. That I can't tell you. You can. I know this. I know you could buy them in bulk from AccuSplit directly at a good price. Like if you wanted to buy 30 of them, at a bargain price, and the one-button ones. And if you call AccuSplit, particularly this country, and say Mark Fenton say Mark Fenton said you have to give us your best possible deal. I can give you a contact even.
Okay, that's awesome. Could I?
Yeah, will you guys? Because I think the simple ones are under 20.
Oh, I know.
Those.
You can do all of that if you want. I mean, I think what's happened is that's like so many, like it's like the weight loss industry. They found a way to charge you more by saying you have to eat our meal plan, right? So you don't just do the thing, but you do our meal plan. I would argue simpler is better, if I may.
How much? I think there's an app
Yeah?
for that, walk-in pedometer.
Oh, that works on your phone, where your phone measures your, that's right. So phones have accelerometers in them to measure movement and can act as pedometers. I just don't know how, good that, the software is now. And it might be great, by the way. It could be fantastic.
Yeah, but you don't always have your phone.
Well, see, my point, that's my thing. I don't always have my phone on me either, right?
Roughly how much are the pedometers?
Oh, under 20. The simple ones are, I think, as little as 18 bucks, 15, in that range. There are, okay, so that's a good digital one. They have non-digital ones that are sort of the ones that are given away as prizes and so on. They tend to be less accurate. So my inclination would be spend on a decent digital pedometer, but the simplest version. And I say all that
AccuSplit
is one of the companies. If you look at the back page of the document Lisa just handed out, I actually mentioned a couple of websites and 800 numbers for a couple of the manufacturers.
Good, though, with the clip.
Oh yeah, you got to have the clip.
I know.
You got it. You want that. You're going to be losing these babies.
Can I just ask you something? I have plantar fasciitis and
Yeah.
Saucony.
Yeah.
I don't know how you say that.
Saucony, yeah, that's
Sneakers. What do you think about that?
It's not going to be. Check them from. Do my tests. Find out whether it flexes through the arch. If it's firm through the arch, has the flexibility in the ball, then you're fine. Don't worry about the shoe. Start the treatment that I just talked about, which is the stretching, the rolling the ice thing. You know, do that. Yeah, but the shoe is not it won't be the problem as long as you're sure it's firm through the midfoot, through the arch. All right, let me give you my last bet. Here's my last pitch. Remember the circles?
Yeah.
We've been talking about you and family and friends, how to change your life. Some of you may know I served on the planning board. I told you that my work is really focused on building a more walkable world. And we know what it takes to do that. There's really good research on this. If you were to say to me, Mark, what defines the communities where people walk a lot versus where they don't? 4 things. Listen closely to my 4 things. Because I want you to be advocates for these 4 things in our town. And we need this because it is a never-ending struggle. People tend not to take the long view here. It's always the short-sighted. Is it going to cost us money or not? And if it is, then I'm not going to do it. Rather than, is it going to, sort of serve us all collectively? Is it going to improve my quality of life? I mean, there's sort of many deeper things to think about. Here are my 4 things. Number 1, there's a greater mix or variety of destinations in proximity. What that means is different kinds of things are close together. Let me be very clear. If you think about most of the development in the United States in the last 40 years, it was a suburban style of design. We built housing subdivision, housing subdivision, housing subdivision. Then we built a mall, right? And all the retail was clustered at the mall. Then we built an office park, and all the employment opportunities were in that office park. And increasingly, in communities around the country, we consolidated our schools. We went to, rather than 3 elementary schools in neighborhoods, we went to 1 big one because we were going to save money on that. It's going to less real estate in one. And what did that mean? Every kid gets driven to that school. Nobody walks or bikes to school anymore. Like we did when the Jenkins School was restored here, and I know it was great angst about the cost and everything else, but it was a neighborhood school, and our neighborhood kids could walk from K through 6th grade to school, and we did. And we did. A lot of our kids walked a lot to that school, meaning they were more likely to meet those recommendations for long-term health. So mix of destinations is what historically a town like Scituate was. You had village centers that had things like post office and shopping and restaurants and other businesses that you might need in daily life. Schools in neighborhoods, neighborhood recreational space like those trails that we talked about. A mix of destinations was historically how towns were built. The modern suburban style of design is a post-World War II artifact of everybody owning automobiles and assuming that we all wanted to drive all the time. That is especially problematic for our youngest and our oldest residents who can't drive yet or don't drive anymore. It is disastrous. And we can correlate the difference in obesity rates, listen closely now, between the San Antonios and Houstons of the world, the cities that were built based on the automobile. I don't know if you've visited, but they are suburban sprawl, massive highways. It's all about driving everywhere in places like that. Versus the Bostons and Minneapolises and Chicagos and indeed Scituates of the world that were designed on a scale where you could actually walk to your destination. That's number one, mix of destinations. Number two, connect a network of facilities. And when I mean a network that you can walk on and bicycle on. So it's sidewalks, multi-use trails and pathways, bike lanes, things like that. It embarrasses me how many of our roads in this town still don't have a sidewalk or a path beside them. Ludicrous that Country Way, you have to take your life in your hands to get by Steverman Farms. Ludicrous! Particularly because we've repaved that road at least twice in my time in living in this town, right, 20 years. We regularly miss opportunities because the cheapest time to build a sidewalk is when you've got all the paving equipment out there anyway. We should be screaming about that. We have a sidewalk plan in this town, a sidewalk plan that indicates where some of the priority routes are. They are the ones closest to schools, senior center, other destinations that we might go to. Senior housing, so think central housing. Those are the kinds of places that should, if nothing else, have good sidewalks on them because they're places people might walk to and from, right? We should speak up for that, and we should do it opportunistically. I'm not saying we should build a huge budget and spend new money when we're doing the work anyway. We're out on a road digging it up because we have to fix the water pipes. How much of that have you seen in the last 15 years? Lots of that work. Every time we do that is an opportunity to potentially widen and at least put a shoulder on the road or put an actual sidewalk next to it. Would it cost more? Yes. Would it cost lots more? Much less than if we went and did the project separately. You do it opportunistically when you're doing the work anyway. That's number two. Number three. Site design, what I'll call functional designs. So this one is subtle. Think about the difference between going to one of the stores on Front Street versus going to Shaw's or Stop and Shop on Route 3A with the giant parking lot out in front, or any mall in America. So most of retail that we designed in the last 30 or 40 years designed for the automobile. Giant parking lot, no actual sidewalk to the front door. Right?
Yeah.
No bike parking rack. None of those things. If you think about the most appealing places to walk that you know, building is up at the sidewalk. If there's parking, it's either on-street parking or maybe behind the building. We're lucky. Front Street actually models this very nicely. Indeed, the mix of destinations, when we talk about having a mix, Front Street even has that because it has retail on the first floor and some housing above. You can live downtown and not own a car. I would argue Scituate would be a reasonable town now to live car-free. Here's why. You could live downtown, walk to most of your daily needs, grocery store, hardware, pharmacy, post office, right, bank, all of that. Furthermore, with the little sloop, you could hop on the sloop and be down at the train station in minutes. So when you want to go into Boston or when I want to fly out of Logan Airport, I could do it all by transit. My point is, even in little Scituate, we're doing these things on scale, on some scale. It's a modest scale. It's not New York City. It's not Boston, right? It's a different scale. Last but not least, it's got to be safe and accessible to everybody. Somebody in a wheelchair, somebody who is visually impaired or blind. In other words, it's got to work for everybody. A kid walking or riding their bike. So I think about Joey Thornton riding his bike downtown. I want the traffic to be slow enough and he in a design such that it's safe enough for him to do that and not feel like we're taking his life into his hands, right, to go do that. And sadly, I'm not sure we've got that. I think there are places where, for example, it's really dangerous to ride a bicycle in this town. The roads are windy and narrow, and there aren't shoulders. We haven't striped bicycle lanes. That doesn't mean we can't. And there's talk about how we can repair that, where the opportunities are to improve that. The reason I'm telling you all this is, if we're at all serious about the three circles, we need people to speak up about that third ring, community. So not just about youth, not just about family and friends. We've got to build a place where these choices are natural. So I invite you guys to be voices for that when the opportunity comes. Town meeting, public hearings, anytime you get the chance, speak up in favor of these. It will matter to you, but also to friends and family, nieces and nephews, children and grandchildren. And here's why I'm really froth at the mouth adamant about this. Here's what you need to know. This is the most scary fact I'm going to tell you all day. We're raising a generation of kids in this country that statistically will have shorter life expectancies than their parents. Their rates of chronic disease things like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, will be so much higher that that generation will have shorter life expectancies than us. It's not Ebola, guys. It's not avian flu. That's not what's going to do it. It's cardiovascular disease. That's a mind-boggling thing to me, to think in the 21st century we've built a world where they're going to be less active than us, so much so, right, that they're going to have shorter life expectancies. I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with that being the legacy that my generation leaves for the next. I hope you're not either. So, get some physical activity. Get more if you can. Invite somebody else to join you. Reach out, be a model of physical activity, whatever kind you can get. Get out and walk, just stand up and do your stretches during the day, whatever does it, and be a voice for positive change in the community. We really need it. Pleasure to visit with you guys. Thank you. A pleasure. My pleasure.